Hey, everybody, and welcome, Chuck Pederson. This is Johnny Kilmore with Russ Brown Motorcycle Attorneys, and I am sitting with Chuck Pederson, who's the Executive Director at ABATE of California, and also head of Local 3, their chapter down there. And, first off, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Been busy with all this stuff around ABATE and what we have going on this year, but I'm doing well. My health is there, and I'm keeping busy.
Right on, right on. Yeah, and we'll get in, of course, to what ABATE is. Most people, I think, are familiar with the name and they know it's some kind of motorcycle rights organization. I think there's also a lot of misconceptions, too, that people think because most of the riders are cruisers or ride, American V twins, that it's specific to that. So I'm going to talk about that stuff. But first, I want to kind of get to know you. I've been an ABATE member myself for several years, and so I'm familiar with the name, but I don't really know your background. And so before we get into like ABATE and your role with it, I was wondering what got you into motorcycling originally, and how'd you get into the movement of motorcycle rights?
What got me into motorcycle was my family. Um, my dad and my uncles all rode. Um, it was a big thing for my dad, and I remember being on the back of his 71 LH with a tractor seat as a passenger. If you know what that means, you're broad-legged. I would put it that way. And my dad was a big guy. But that really got me into it. My first bike was a 72 Suzuki 500. Um, my dad gave it to me as a gift.
Wait, the two-stroke three-cylinder 500? Like the
Yes,
Oh
yes.
wow, that's a trusting father to give that to a young man.
And I was 15 years old, so I couldn't ride up the streets. You know what I did? I rode it off road.
That is like definitely a story in its own, because those bikes were kind of famous for ill handling at anything but it being in a straight line. And usually, when you're riding off road, you're not in a straight line too often.
No, you're not. It was a lot to control, and you had to be careful of the bumps you go over because you don't have the suspension. But anyway, that's how I got started.
And
Um,
then, yeah, motorcycle rights obviously is a thing that a lot of people. I mean, when you're starting motorcycling, you're just kind of into motorcycles for whatever reason, and I don't think people even understand that there's a movement and that there's pushback. And then they become vaguely aware of it. But what got you actually involved, not just sort of as a wallflower, but actively involved?
the helmet law.
The
That did it
California
for
Humble
me.
Law back in the was 88, 86.
I think it was a little later than that, but yes, yeah. Um, I have always heard about ABATE. I come from Indianapolis, Indiana, and the ABATE of Indiana is a big, strong organization that does great stuff. And I was a hang around, but never really joined the organization. When I came out to California, um, I was still riding. In fact, I put my bike with a lowrider from Indianapolis to California, and I moved out here. Put everything on me, gas box. But anyway, I got here in the Humble Law, wasn't concerned, and I was listening to Dick Floyd and what he was giving us statistics, and ABATE was clearly, challenging them. And my research showed that ABATE statistics were correct, and I didn't want to be a complainer. I wanted to be a person who actually wanted to be part of the change process. So I joined ABATE officially then. I bought a helmet. When the helmet law passed, I swore to myself I would never buy another helmet until we got rid of the helmet law. And I'm still wearing that helmet. Yeah, it's old and it's beat up, but yeah. So that really got me into it. Um, when I figured out how to do it, because I didn't want to be a follower, I want to be a leader. I want to make a change. So I joined Local 3 because they're in my area. I signed up as secretary first off, because secretary is the position that allowed me to see all the information. everything's going on. Everything came across my desk,
Right.
you know. And then after I did that for a year, I went to run as president, and I did that for a long time, and then I became state legislative director for ABATE, California, about 4 years ago, and was active at the time that ABATE supported the lane splitting bill. And I'm to the point now where I was looking at retiring, and ABATE came back to me and said, "Hey, we need you. Will you please volunteer for the board?" I thought I was just volunteering, but when I volunteered, found out I was going to be executive director. That's kind of how these happen sometimes.
And that's actually leads right into my next question too, because I think people that know about it, they think that it's an organization that is against the helmet law, and they have no idea some of the other accomplishments. So instead of asking a broad question of what is ABATE and what it does, I'd rather say, like, what has ABATE done in California, especially, that you're most proud of or is most memorable for the organization? Because the fight for the helmet law is only like one facet of what ABATE is about.
Well, the thing about the helmet law, I want to first say, is that we are not against helmets or the right to choose. I think that's really what it is.
Really?
We want people to have a choice. When you look at motorcycle injury statistics, the majority of them are the torso impacts, internal bleeding. Very little of it is head trauma, and I won't go into the helmet discussion here, but just to say quickly, yeah. But the other thing is, we work with the CHP, and we supported the motorcycle lane splitting bill. Many people may not know this, but the lane splitting for a long time was considered a tolerable practice. It was either legal or illegal. And if you ever had an accident, even if someone else cut you right away off, the insurance companies would settle in a no fault or dual fault status, which means that your damages, the other guy pays for their damages, and we walk on our way. Now that the lane splitting law is enacted, insurance companies can't do that. We've done other things like, secured off-road rides. I don't think a lot of people know that there's an off-road element to us. And so we've done that as well. I'm not prepared to talk about specific. I have a list. Didn't think that was going to be a question here, but
I could just, what I was already going to say at the end of the article is that abate.org already has a section if you want to know about the accomplishments. There's it's right in the drop down menu. So I don't want to waste a bunch of time with a checklist. I just want to make sure people understand that it's not just about the helmet law, because I think that was even a misgiving for me when I first joined. I just assumed that was the main thing. To find out that there was a full-time lobbyist, and it was not just a bunch of people getting together to complain to each other, because you could do that with a bartender, right? Like the actual move for motorcycle rights. I think it's even people that are aware of ABATE, I feel like they just don't seem to know. Like, the one that I'm personally most proud of was the emissions bill when that first came out for motorcycles.
Yes.
It was so open ended. It was like, we're just going to pass emission laws and then we'll figure out what the law, like the California Air Resource Board could figure it out later. And that was very much what happened to light duty diesel engines. And like, it did get passed, and it just, the mess it created for people that own diesel engines, to the point where their registrations are getting revoked. And like, nobody seems to know that when it first came out, it was like that. And because of ABATE and a few other, but mainly ABATE, that bill ended up essentially being the stamp on the muffler needs to match the stamp on the emissions tag. We'll send you to a smog check place to do whatever we feel like later. Like, it was just so open ended when it first came out. And that, to me, that was, because I was actually an active member at the time too, so I got to really see the whole process, and had to write letters and make phone calls and all that stuff. So just it was a huge win, and I don't think it gets talked about at all, let alone enough.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. They had two bills coming in this year, and one of them was to put sound metering devices in the red light camera housing, and they would try to interpret a loud vehicle and with a camera, and there's really no way to do that practically. If you're riding a pack of motorcycles, which one's allowed? If it's right, the camera can't tell, and you get into environments with a lot of buildings, sound reflection, they can't tell, and sound is always directional, light is not. And so there were so many things wrong with that bill that we were able to. However, they did get one through that we want to have law enforcement. We want to arm them with decibel meters and and go around and actually record bikes in a pullover in a perfection circumstance. And we challenge them on training. There's no training program, so let's do that because they're trained for other things, but not this. We challenge them on funding, how they're going to fund these meters with all law enforcement. And then we challenge them on the sign-off process because there's no clear. Once you get a ticket, the way this law works, once you get a ticket, that ticket goes to the DMV, and you cannot re-register your motorcycle until you get to fix the ticket completed. And so we challenge them on the sign-off process because according to code, you actually have to go to a DOT shop and sign off there. And they want it to happen in smog shops. Again, where's the training? So we got a 4-year moratorium on it, and we're continue to fight it. I think we're going to be successful in this because of all the ambiguity in the law.
Excellent. Yeah. I think that kind of shows that just there's always something popping up. And that's part of having a full-time lobbyist isn't even lobbying. It's having somebody full-time watching every bill that gets proposed and flagging that stuff before it even gets out of committee. Because once a bill gains steam, it's actually, I mean, there's ways obviously to slow them down, but it like the motorcycle community, I don't think, none of us have the time individually to go on California, state legislators' website and look at new bills. And so just the fact that like those things are even being made aware, I think is huge.
Well, I think that is a big responsibility to the motorcycle community, all of them, like whether you're on road or off road, whatever you ride, whatever when you breathe, right? I mean, we have a responsibility to make sure that rights are being alienated. And I think it's pretty easy to look at the last 20 years, and shortly, if you look at the next 15 years around EV cells, the things they're wanting to do there, I think there's more pressure for everybody to realize politics is numbers game. We have a lobbyist, but it's one person. He does that research, brings the information up, and it communicates to ABATE, and then ABATE disseminates that information out because everybody can contact the legislators. Everybody is involved. It's a numbers game. And not only when bills are happening, but also when you have a person who's running for re-election or elections in your area and you support him, it's good to get behind that individual and find out how you can volunteer. Those are key relationships that carry ABATE forward, our movement forward when we have to negotiate with legislators on supporting something that or opposing something that we don't feel is appropriate for motorcycle riding.
Right. Yeah, that actually reminds me of the major hot button issue, I think, in the motorcycling press for several years now, because multiple states have had different versions of the bill, but the anti-motorcycle profiling. I moved out of California a couple of years ago, so I actually have no idea. But just I'm kind of wondering what's going on with California and anti-profiling, and what is ABATE involved in for that.
Oh, no.
I just opened up a can of worms, didn't I?
No, you did. It's a great discussion. It really is. I've been involved in the beginning. Motorcycle profiling doesn't exist. Not many people experience it, but the ones who do have their rights violated. And for that very reason, ABATE is involved. Um, we have been pursuing bill language, and at one time we got appropriations, we got to assembly, we got shut down. It's about as far as we ever got. And our challenge is, um, it's hard to argue with the CHP. I'm going to smile. I can't say that. Because they have their own ideas about what profiling is. We have our own ideas about how we receive it. And they say it doesn't exist. We say it does. I've witnessed it many times. So there we are. So we figured 2 years trying to pass a bill, and that didn't work. So let's start with baby steps. And we passed a resolution. I think that was last year, and it's just, and everybody signed off and they agreed. Motor profiling is wrong. Let's not do this anymore. And it's a resolution. It doesn't have a legal founding, but it raises awareness. So takes us to 2023. We had a big change in the board because we saw some changes need to happen in the organization. These are positive changes. COVID was brutal to all of us. I don't care whether you're an individual or an organization. I think most people in an organization suffered membership loss, and we did to a point. We had to redirect. So we got Bobby Trabaldo involved. Bobby has been working with the COC groups for a long period of time and passing legislation.
Real quick, COC is Confederation of Clubs. It's another organization. I just want to, for people that aren't aware of that.
Correct. And we have him now as our state legislative director. He's taken my job, and he's done a phenomenal thing. And we probably engaged too late in the process. You have to have a bill, even earmarked by February, and we formed this new board in January. So timing didn't work out for us. So at this point, we are working forward to trying to get something happen in 2024. But on the most important part, that you alluded to earlier, is the unification rally. And that unification rally is going to do a couple things. We're still working on the agenda, but one of them is to talk about the smog bills, not the smog, but the noise bills that are relevant right now. And then how do we get there for a profiling discussion in 2024? So that's where we're at.
Yeah, it's a thing I've definitely noticed about California before I left and after I left, is that because they set, 10 years ago, they set some sort of emissions bill or some kind of bill to cut things by a certain percent each year. They got the big ones. And so as they get towards the smaller and smaller cuts, and they still need to make those percentages, the number was kind of arbitrary 10 years ago, but they're still following the law. And you have to be especially cognizant and aware of what the legislation is doing, because it seems crazy, but if you've been on a 10-year long path of doing it, the reality in Sacramento is that it's not crazy. It's what we've been doing for 10 years. So you have to watch out for these almost harebrained type of pieces of legislation. It's getting to the point where they're trying to do what they said they were going to do. You see the thing with even the small gasoline engines now they're going after small generators, lawnmowers, things like that.
There's larger politics behind that, in my opinion. But I think earlier you were talking about NOx emission elimination, and NOx emissions is something they created a progressive path to reduce, and it will eventually be forced, because the only motorcycles that will be able to meet the NOx emissions are water-cooled motorcycles. And I think that's why you saw Harley play with the water-cooled heads in some of their FL models. And The V Rod is another one. Eventually, we'll be forced to all have radiators.
Well, I mean, the Sportster, the Evo Sportster, has been around. I mean, the Sportster originally goes back to the 1950s, but the Evo version is, what the early like 86, I think, and that motor has been around. And the Sportster died first in Europe because of Euro 5 emissions, but now you're seeing the Sportster 1200 and 883 going away just completely, and that new Sportster S liquid cool, though I can't remember what it was, 1275 cc, or they have a smaller version too, motor out of Pan America. But yeah, the idea of air cooled engines, and you've seen it even as the emissions have gotten tighter for air cooled engines, they've had to get bigger and bigger and bigger to make the same amount of power without overheating. And so it's clearly happening. And at some point, there's that flipping point. And if legislation decides when we go electric instead of the industry and the technology, it's the people that own the product at the end, I think, that are going to suffer more than the legislators or the industry itself.
Yep. The whole EV thing is going to be an interesting challenge for ABATE and all motorcyclists. One, when does it get back? When is it motorcycles when ICE or internal combustion engines are no longer available? And I read some articles about I forget the Harley's electric bike name.
Oh, the Livewire.
Oh, the Livewire. Yes, thank you. But a gentleman just tried to ride it from LA to Vegas and back, and it was a miserable thing because going to the mountains, your range is limited. It's shortened. It's not made for that. And you have to charge like 3 times and wait hours. But also the other side of EV, which ABATE is dealing with, is the autonomous driver thing,
right,
where vehicle is going to be smart. You're going to avoid obstacles. And there's already been a couple instances where they hit motorcyclists and even pedestrians and even bicyclists. And we're challenging, along with MRF, we're Motorcycle Riders Foundation, we're also challenging the testing procedures and saying that, really it's this ready technology at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen, it was probably 15 years ago, and it was an international organization that, tries to, I can't remember the name of it, but they tried to standardize road signs. When they were coming up with a concept of how to get autonomous vehicles to work like on interstates, the plan was to just not allow single track vehicles. And that was the solution. This was back in like 2002 or something, but I remember just being shocked. Or a motorcycle rights organization comes in and says, "Hey, what's the plan for motorcycles?" And they're like, "Oh, they just don't have a plan for motorcycles." Which the fact that you're just not even on their radar for good, bad, or other is a huge problem.
Yeah.
I'd still rather have somebody driving and not paying attention, because if they do see me at the last second, they have a natural instinct to not want to kill a person. But LiDAR and radar and algorithms just weigh the thing based on numbers and cues. And I know
I would like people not to text and talk on the phone while they're driving.
If you automate things too much, but it's not fully automated, then the operator just stops paying attention. So you actually have to. Yeah. You don't give them. Trains have that same problem. They have to push a button every 15 minutes just to verify they're awake, because it's so automated that despite all of the training, the training's going to tell you that there's nothing to pay attention to. 10 years and nothing's ever happened. So cars are just running into that problem, but it's a decades-old problem in other industries.
Yeah, the technology's not there. I think it's a great idea, but let's make sure that it keeps everybody's. The idea around electric vehicles and autonomous driving is that 0 factor number that they promised a long time ago, that nobody's going to die in road accidents, right? Well, if they're not getting there, that's our point.
How do people get involved? Obviously, abate.org is the website, so you can sign up there. But what's the best thing that somebody can do if they're concerned about the entire concept of motorcycle rights and our place on the road in the future?
You can sign up there. Also go to the list of locals and find the local in your area and make sure to attend that. They also can contact me because that is my responsibility to make sure I make these connections happen. Um, and then when you find your local and their meeting night and you can attend, go there and be active, be involved. Um, I have a goal of going out and reaching every local, meeting every local this year, and it's with the intent of creating that type of environment and making sure that the message is out there. We need membership. Not only do we need membership, but we need people to be active. And that's kind of the thing, you know, and I say this to everybody listening. You sign up, that's beautiful. We get money, it helps pay our bills. Perfect. You go to a ABATE meeting, I love you even more, right? Because now you're active, you're listening, you can help share information. You can become an officer in that local, beautiful, right? I mean, that's yay. And we need those as well. And if you want to get involved at the board level, yay, right? And so it's a progressive thing, but it simply starts with just, you know, being a member and then hopefully showing up at a meeting.
Right. Yeah, I noticed that was the big thing for me, was going from, well, I paid my money, so I did my part, to once you show up, you just get a simple reminder. Hey, make a phone call to your, state legislator. Here's the number. You don't even have to do any of the work, really. And God, it only takes a minute to leave a voicemail or to talk to a lady. I mean, there was one where I actually got a real email back because I didn't write a form letter. Usually you get a form response if you do. And I actually got a real email after. They were like, thank you very much for, now I actually got my little sort of attaboy, like, oh, what I did actually got noticed by a human being and didn't just get, a tally mark of for or against, as they go. So
Yeah.
it's a huge step just for going to pay your monies to just show up. Most locals only meet once a month still, I guess. Right? Like
Yes. Yeah. That's correct.
Okay.
Ours, 1,000 Oaks, is the third Thursday every month at 7 o'clock at the Elks Lodge.
There you go.
I just did a promo.
There was always a really good breakfast at the one we had at, I think it was in Eagles Lodge in Hesperia. And I'd go there just to get the biscuits and gravy, and then you might as well hang out and listen and have a cup of coffee. It's an hour out of your day, one morning a month. Like it's not a huge commitment.
Dave Hastings is in that local, if I'm not mistaken.
What's that?
Dave Hastings is in that local, if I'm not mistaken.
I know that name. Yeah, it's been a few years. Yeah. I moved up to San Francisco and then moved out of state. But I was really involved with that local. That local was great. They do like a roadside assistance thing when people were doing the ride to, for Laughlin. Because it's right off Interstate 15, so people would volunteer, and if somebody ran out of gas or needed help, come out with a trailer or at least drop off some water while they're waiting for AAA. And that kind of outreach stuff I thought was really cool. In addition to it's just being a part of the community, doing unto others, and it didn't take a lot of effort. That's for sure.
Great.
Oh, one last question I wanted to ask: have you ever been in a motorcycle accident? And if so, what did you learn from it?
Yes. The worst one I've been in is really, I was sitting at a stoplight late at night, waiting to turn right. And while I was sitting there waiting, I heard the tires starting to screech. And I kind of looked to the 3 intersections in front of me and didn't see anything. And I looked in my rearview mirror and saw the headlights going back and forth as this guy was coming at me. He hit me in the rear tire, rear shock. It pushed me out into the middle of the intersection. Remember, I'm at a red light. That means everybody else is on green. And I remember leaving the bike and sliding on my back and thinking to myself, I have to get on my feet as quickly as possible. And that's what I was doing. I was sliding while I was trying to stand at the same time. Um, just minor abrasions. Uh, what did I learn from it? You know, keep your head on a swivel. I was braced for it at least because I knew I saw him just a few feet from me, so I was already braced for it. And I don't know, you know, I don't know what else to do. I think the guy was drunk. He actually ended up leaving the scene after some gal yelled at him. And nobody got the license plate on it. But you know, be aware of your surroundings. Um, there's been a lot of situations where I've been able to avoid accidents, and that's one thing ABATE is about. You know, is proper training, um, learning how to do hard braking, um, learning to keep your escape route at all times. That's always, you know, if you're ever in a situation, always know where to go if something were to happen. Um, and take a motorcycle training course if you're new. If you're not new, they also have advanced training courses, and these courses help you do these things: how to do hard lane changes, how to do hard braking, how to brace for running over something on the road. That's something that Beta is about, and something we definitely support.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's I think one of the best things about having to ask this question is that I get really good answers of what people learned. It's also like you don't want to wait for a wreck to learn the lesson. There's this old saying, life is the worst teacher because it gives you the test first and the lesson after. And I think that really applies in motorcycling. So close calls are a good way to learn, but it's also great to simulate close calls in a place where there's not cross traffic and drunk people and animals and
Yep.
pedestrians. And
And you have
so
someone there who can teach you how to improve your skill set. That's really important in the advanced course.
and to maintain your skill set. I mean, I've gone a long time myself riding on the street without any kind of close calls, and you can just sort of tell I wouldn't say a cavalier attitude, but just that you forget the risk because the risk has been gone for so long. And
Yep.
I think it is really good to stay up. I do a lot of reading when if I can't take a course or something like that, but and also practicing in the parking lot. Especially the first bike I got that had anti-lock brakes, I had to get used to them and trust them. I had already been using them in cars for decades and was aware of because you still don't want to slam on the brakes. You still want to load the front, get the weight on the front tire, then pull in and let the ABS do its job. And so practicing with that helped a lot too. But yeah, it's a continual thing. I guess that's one of the things that makes motorcycling fun too, is that it's you're never really done learning.
Correct. Correct. I've been riding. Oh, like I said earlier, I was riding before I even had a driver's license, and I'm 65 years old now. So, you know, knock on wood, I've been very lucky. I think I have lost many friends in motorcycle accidents. So, always be aware of the unattentive driver. Um, the people who do left-hand turns. One person was driving down the road and the guy did a U-turn right in front of him and took him out that way, right in the middle of the road. So, you know, we ride these things because as we know, they are dangerous, but we accept that risk every time we get on a motorcycle, and proper training is what allows you to reduce that risk.
Absolutely. All right. Chuck, I appreciate your time and won't take any more of it. So have a good day.
All right, thank you.